Anti-Afro Spengalis. I'm coming on here because I wanted to give an update on the situation involving Daystar Peterson, aka Tory Lanez, the rapper. I did a couple of videos and his sentencing date for his convictions, plural. For those of you who don't recall or didn't know, he was convicted of assault with a semi automatic firearm perpetrated upon Megan Thee Stallion. This is back in December 2022. There were other charges involved. He was carrying a concealed firearm in a vehicle that was unregistered. They charged him with reckless discharge of a firearm, and they added these enhancements of great bodily injury. So let's just be right up front. He's been convicted. He stands convicted. The great bodily injury aspect of this case dictates prison time. There's no way around that. The question is how much time is fair and just. I support Megan Thee Stallion, the victim who says she wants him under the jail. Victim has a right to say that. I'm not going to knock her for that. But what I'm going to try to do is talk about whether or not what the prosecutors are asking for. The prosecutors who suddenly became hypersensitive about their names being mentioned and people talking about them, Kathy Taw and Alexander Bott. Okay, your names are being mentioned. I'll get into that in a second. What they're asking for at this point is 13 years. Re-emphasizing he's been convicted, but I had problems from the start with these prosecutors, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't think they did Megan Thee Stallion justice from the outset. And the reason for that is they undercharged this case. And when I say they undercharged it, as the case progressed, they started adding on charges and trying to add on charges because they weren't successful in every instance. And they did that when they saw a couple things going on. The judge started ruling against them. There were some rulings that were made, that were handed down, the prosecutors didn't like. And then they saw that black folks were swarming black social media, which has a mind of its own. They started getting involved. So the pressure started to increase. But by that time, the prosecutors already showed their hand. And let me tell you why. And why I think 13 years is excessive given the circumstances. Again, Megan Thee Stallion could want the maximum time afforded by law, which is 22 years and 8 months, which he's not going to get. She can want the 13 years. I'm still saying, based on everything that's happened, I take issue with these sensitive prosecutors, these public servants who all of a sudden didn't want to be talked about and are complaining to the judge that Tory Lanez was talking about them. And let me tell you what's happening. After Tory Lanez got arrested, he was issued a criminal protective order, which differs from a restraining order. Restraining orders are in civil court. People can file their own, a lot of people do. I think in most instances, people file their own restraining orders. Or you can have an attorney file it on your behalf and you will be participating in the process. But a criminal protective order is only issued through a judge. The alleged victim would not have to come in and file anything. That's part of the criminal proceeding. So, what ended up happening, and this is why I get so irritated about inequity, the prosecutor had multiple chances to charge Tory Lanez with additional criminal offenses and didn't do it. Now that we're coming down to the sentencing phase, they want to try to add on and still punish him for these criminal charges they didn't level against him. And I don't think that is fair. Let me explain what happened. When Tory Lanez violated the criminal protective order, the first thing he did, he showed up at a concert when Megan Thee Stallion was on stage. Right when she was going off the stage, he runs up on the stage and he violated their criminal protective order. Of course, he denied it at first. So the prosecutors go to the judge, but they're griping and complaining, but they're not charging him with violating the order. I don't know who gets away with that in this state. You don't. Even if it's a civil restraining order, if you violate that, that's a criminal offense and you're going to get charged with a crime. They didn't charge him. I'm thinking they just want this over with. Nobody's really paying attention. And you know why I know they weren't really paying attention? Because they're talking about it now. People, this was going on before. Not many people were really tuning in. This is before the trial got started. This was pretty quiet, except for the mess that was going on social media, but people weren't really focusing on these charges. They were just getting involved in some aspect, and even in a smaller little circle of people who know Megan Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez, that's where a lot of stuff was going on. It wasn't this huge thing that people were really covering a lot. So the prosecutors decided not to charge Tory Lanez with a separate crime. Okay, that's what they call prosecutor's discretion. The judge even mentioned it. This is going back during that time. We're not talking about what people are talking about now. The judge told Tory Lanez, you're lucky the prosecutors didn't charge you. So they upped his bail. Someone who has millions of dollars isn't going to be concerned about a bail increase. Okay, so did he learn the lesson? No. But let me take a couple steps back. The night of the shooting, Tory Lanez assaulted Kelsey Harris, who is Megan Thee Stallion's friend. This is the prosecutor asserting this from the very start. And they said he tried to bribe Megan Thee Stallion and Kelsey with $1 million. Okay, they knew this, but they didn't charge him for that. So keep that in mind. So let's progress. We get to another violation. He starts talking in social media that Megan Thee Stallion is lying about getting shot, making these statements. Okay, there's a criminal protective order in place. He's not supposed to be making references to Megan Thee Stallion. So the judge previously had stated he can't go to any events when that issue happened on that performance stage. He can't go to any events that Megan Thee Stallion is at. So he starts popping off on social media saying that she lied about getting shot. Obviously, Megan Thee Stallion's going to be upset by this. So Tory Lanez gets in trouble again because he's violating the criminal protective order. They bring him in again. The prosecutor is whining again. But what? They increase his bail again. Okay, they increase his bail. Continuing on, there is a restraining order or a criminal protective order with respect to evidence. This was specifically about the DNA, and it hit social media like a firestorm. This is when the traffic started picking up on the case. So now this is all out. And it was determined that Tory Lanez did release that information because of posts he made on social media, and guess who picks it up and runs with it? DJ Academics. It was a mess. It was a nightmare. So Tory Lanez was brought in again. Okay? And the bail is increased. Did the prosecutor ask for any charges to be filed? No. Do you think he learned his lesson? No. What does he do next? I told you this was going to come up, people. He goes off and, by strong evidence indicated, attacks August Alsina in Chicago. Not only that, he's able to travel freely across the United States. They weren't taking this case with the degree of seriousness they would have had Tory Lanez shot Kylie Jenner, whose party they were leaving. And he shouldn't have shot anybody. But if he had shot this white woman, if he had attacked one of her friends, he would have been charged with attempted murder. They would have charged everything right from the start. So this August Alsina thing comes up when the prosecutor is now whining and complaining that he attacked August Alsina. I'm not discounting the attack, but I'm very irritated with the prosecutor. You've been whining about this man the entire time, and you didn't have the guts to file charges when you should have filed charges. So they wanted the judge to take Tory Lanez into custody and give him a $5 million bail. A $5 million bail on someone who hasn't even killed anybody or ran multi-million dollars worth of drugs? Obviously, you're not going to get that. See, that's just anger. that they didn't get what they wanted. After the judge turned the prosecutors down, then they started trying to file additional charges. The first additional charge was the reckless discharge of the firearm. This was not in the original indictment, the reckless discharge of a firearm. But this is what they're going for at this point. After the judge has been turning them down, more and more people are looking at the case. They feel they might be losing. They started panicking. They were especially panicked at people questioning the evidence. Focus on the damn case. Work the case. Don't be focused on social media. And they were absolutely beside themselves. You could tell by the way they were acting. The defense attorneys fought it, but the judge allowed it. Then here they come with witness intimidation. This is right before the trial is starting, and the judge had turned them down. So here's my thing. All of this showing up in a sentencing memorandum, yes, put it in there. But they're trying to get time off of all of these episodes that they refuse to charge. Now, this is what I'm saying. If these instances where he violated the criminal protective order and the prosecutors didn't charge him, the only quote punishment they can seek for that he's ineligible for probation on any of these charges because he failed during pre-trial release. That's what you get. You don't get to add years on. You didn't charge him. I think that's outrageous. See, don't have the guts to treat a black woman who's been a crime victim. I don't care who the perpetrator is. You didn't fully charge the case when you should have charged it. You start getting sensitive because people are talking about you. Now you're trying to load on the back end. I think that's ridiculous. I think, honest to God, Tory Lanez and how he acts is despicable. Yes, it is despicable. As despicable as it is, that doesn't mean somebody gets extra years because the prosecutor was too lazy or too intimidated or didn't care from the outset. And now, what I find most offensive is Tory Lanez, after the judge lifted the order disallowing him to speak about the case, he starts to release information which he has every right to release, give his personal opinion. Although repugnant, you have a right to say it. Now the prosecutors want him punished for that he's accusing us of fabricating the DNA evidence, but none of that showed up in the motion for a new trial. Oh my God, he's talking about us. So what? They can say, people can say you fabricated evidence. He's not an attorney. Now, how the defense attorneys said that, that's another story. Yes, defense attorneys can challenge evidence, but they can't say to the prosecutor, you lied, prosecutor. You're an ethical prosecutor. You fabricated. You can't say it like that. You can present evidence that you question the validity of the evidence, but you don't personally attack the prosecutor. But a defendant gets to do that. Where does it say you can't talk about the prosecutor? It's called the First Amendment. Even when the judge issued that order on Tory Lanez, he was very specific that he couldn't talk about Megan Thee Stallion. He could have said, this is a scam. I'm being railroaded. This is unfair. You can say that. He can't talk about her. Also, they're talking about how he waged a campaign of terror against Megan Thee Stallion. Although I agree, I think Tory Lanez used social media in the most grotesque, horrendous, abusive manner, but they didn't do anything about it. They didn't do anything. They didn't try to get him charged for that. So how in the heck can you say a person needs to get more time because I didn't file criminal charges? I think the original position that I held, this case, I think is worth 8 to 10 years in prison. I think the fact that he performed poorly during pretrial release would eradicate his eligibility for probation on any of these charges, because ordinarily any of the charges that he had, except for great bodily injury, he could have had probation on those other charges. He'd be on felony probation. He has no criminal record. He had one diversion in Florida for carrying a gun, but that's not a conviction. You can't use that to enhance someone's sentence. I'm just sticking with the whole notion that Megan Thee Stallion wasn't given a fair shake from the outset. Piecemealing these charges later on down the line when the judge started ruling against the prosecutors, I think that was their motivation. He ruled against them in some other aspects as well. Oh, another thing they were pissed off about. His attorneys lobbied successfully to take him off home detention because after the August Alsina incident, which I knew would come back to haunt Tory Lanez, at one point the defense stated we cannot effectively provide preparation for the trial if he's on house arrest or home detention. And the prosecutors didn't want that. The judge ruled against them. And then they started tacking on all these other charges. I mean, my whole thing is treat everyone the same. If a person has perpetrated what you say are criminal offenses, he's trying to bribe people, he's intimidating witnesses, he's assaulting witnesses out there on the street on the night that it happened, and you had an interview with the other victim. A white man saw it all happening. You can't go into the Hollywood Hills acting the fool in them white folks' neighborhood and they're not going to see you. You even had an independent witness see Tory Lanez firing the handgun and putting his hands and grabbing Kelsey. He grabbed her by the neck and all flung her around. You had witnesses and you still didn't charge these offenses that you want extra time for. I think it is considered cruel and unusual punishment to try to tack on these years because you didn't file criminal charges when you should have. That's my position on it. I think a person who doesn't have a criminal record, you didn't file attempted murder charges, I think for this situation, 8 to 10 years remains reasonable. That's my opinion. I think he should also have a period of parole after he completes his sentence. But, excuse me, he's from Canada, so I think he should be deported. That's what needs to happen. But trying to get licks back on the end of a case that you didn't have the interest enough to file criminal charges on, I think that is considered cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the Sixth Amendment. I think perhaps the most childish aspect of this sentencing memorandum was the prosecutor crying and complaining because Tory Lanez made a song about the shooting. It's called the First Amendment. Why aren't you attacking the producers through getting this song into circulation? I don't listen to rap music where women are being degraded and it's emulating violence, but that's me. Does that mean because I don't like it, everybody else has to not like it? That means it's got to be shut down? They're not shutting down that industry. Why? Because black folks aren't making the most money off of what's happening. Either way it goes, it's First Amendment. This is why they are not able to stop people from publishing books or profiting off crimes that they are convicted of because it violates the First Amendment. You should have taken care of the case from the outset instead of trying to violate somebody's Sixth Amendment rights because they wrote a song about the crime. He wasn't even convicted of it yet. Even if he is convicted of it, he can still write a song about the crime. It's called the First Amendment. This is really shabby stuff, people. I'm going to see if I can locate where I found that motion so you can read it. I agree with what the prosecutor is saying, that Megan Thee Stallion was in a vulnerable position and all of these things, but they didn't file when they should have. Just because you didn't do what you were supposed to do, that doesn't give you the constitutional authority to punish the convicted. Making rap songs is a legal way of making money, and it's a way that Tory Lanez is using to support his children or child and family. So that is actually a mitigating factor. So you have a mitigating factor about someone, you're trying to turn it into an aggravating factor. I don't think this is going to work, but we'll see. What is the judge going to decide? We don't know until the judge renders his decision. And I'm going to be very interested in hearing what he has to say. But I think if they move forward and they're able to get 13 years on these crimes, I think he has a good chance of prevailing on an appeal. People, you know the drill. Never forget to heed the warning. Buyer beware.